On the afternoon of February 14th, 2018, just after midday, a 37-year-old man named Mahmoud Hawi finished a workout at the Fitness First gym on West Botany Street in Rockdale, a quiet residential suburb in southern Sydney. He walked out toward his car. As he reached the vehicle, a man wearing a balaclava stepped out and fired multiple shots at close range, striking Hawi in the head and body. The gunman ran. A second man was waiting in a gray Mercedes-Benz station wagon, and the two fled together. Hawi was rushed to St. George Hospital, where he died a short time later. The car used in the getaway was found burning near Chandler Street, a short distance away. The men inside it had already switched vehicles and vanished into the surrounding suburbs. The whole attack had taken seconds. Because the man dying on the way to St. George Hospital was not just another suburban Sydney father. He was Mahmoud Mick Hawi, the former national president and self-styled supreme commander of the Comanchero Motorcycle Club, once the most feared outlaw bikie gang in Australia. He was the man who had stood at the center of a public killing inside Sydney Airport 9 years earlier. A brawl so violent it was filmed by terrified travelers and replayed on every television in the country. And now, after surviving prison, after walking free, after trying to build something like a normal life, he had been hunted down in the car park of his own gym. This is the story of how Sydney's most feared Comanchero boss met his end, and why, years later, no court has ever been able to say for certain who pulled the trigger. If you love stories like this, real downfalls, real betrayals, the hidden side of Sydney's underworld, make sure you subscribe to Sydney Crime. We drop new stories every week. Mahmoud Hawi was born in Beirut, Lebanon, in 1980. In 1985, when he was still a small child, his family fled the Lebanese Civil War as refugees and settled in Sydney, New South Wales, joining the wave of Middle Eastern migration that reshaped the working-class southern and western suburbs of the city through the 1970s and the 1980s. He grew up between two worlds, the Arabic-speaking family home and the streets of southern Sydney, where the children of refugees and migrants carved out a hard, complicated identity. He attended Punchbowl Boys High School, left at 16, and worked for a time in his father's spray painting business. The judge at his later trial would describe his childhood as uneventful and meager. But somewhere in his late teens and early 20s, Hawi found the thing his ordinary beginnings had not given him. He found the Comancheros. The Comanchero Motorcycle Club had been founded in Sydney in 1966, making it Australia's oldest outlaw motorcycle club. Its founding president was a Scottish-born former soldier known as Jock Ross. By the 2000s, the Comancheros had grown into one of the most powerful one-percenter clubs in the country, with interests that ran far beyond motorcycles into the drug trade, nightclub security, extortion, and the violent business of controlling territory. By 2003, still in his early 20s, Mick Hawi had taken it over. He declared himself the club's national president and supreme commander, only the second man to hold that title after Ross himself. In 2005, he was convicted of drug possession. He was young, he was sharp, and he was utterly unafraid. His rise placed him on a direct collision course with the Comancheros' oldest and most hated rivals, the Hells Angels. What happened on the afternoon of March 22, 2009, was not planned. Mick Hawi and the national president of the Hells Angels, Derek Wainohu, happened to be booked on the same flight from Melbourne to Sydney. During that flight, the two men exchanged words. By the time the plane was descending, both had texted their respective gangs, summoning them to Sydney Airport's domestic terminal. When the flight landed and the two leaders walked out into the public arrivals area, their men were waiting, and what began as a confrontation between two groups exploded into one of the most shocking acts of public violence in modern Australian history. According to witnesses and footage later examined at trial, the brawl tore through the terminal. Men grabbed the heavy metal bollards used to manage queues and swung them like swords. The violence rolled from the ground floor up to the departures level. Travelers ran, children watched. Around 15 men were involved, and roughly 50 people witnessed it. By the time it was over, a man lay dying on the floor of one of Australia's busiest airports. His name was Anthony Zervas. He was 29 years old, and he was the brother of a senior Hells Angels figure, Peter Zervas. He had been beaten to death, suffering massive head injuries. The killing was captured on camera and broadcast across the nation. It horrified the public and shattered, almost overnight, the lingering romantic image of outlaw bikers as harmless rebels. State and federal authorities convened emergency meetings. New anti-gang strike forces were stood up, and the man police identified as the leader of the Comanchero side of the brawl was Mahmoud Mick Howie. In November 2011, a New South Wales Supreme Court jury convicted Mick Howie of the murder of Anthony Zervas. He was sentenced to a lengthy term, a non-parole period of more than 2 decades, but the conviction did not survive. On appeal, the New South Wales Court of Criminal Appeal found serious problems with the verdict. The appeal judges concluded it was not safe to find that Howie himself had struck the fatal blows, and that the question of provocation should have been left to the jury. The murder conviction was quashed, leaving open the possibility of a retrial. Rather than face that retrial on a murder charge, Howie pleaded guilty in 2014 to the lesser offense of manslaughter. He was sentenced for that manslaughter, and in 2015, having already spent years behind bars, he was released early after the parole board accepted he had shown satisfactory conduct in prison. He had gone in as the supreme commander of the Comancheros. He came out into a different world. The club he had once ruled had moved on without him. The young men he had led were older now, and the leadership had passed to others. The Comancheros were becoming something bigger and more dangerous than the gang Howie had known. A transnational operation with tentacles reaching into the global drug trade, run increasingly from offshore by a new generation of bosses. The identity that had defined Mick Howie's entire adult life no longer belonged to him. For the next few years, Mick Howie did what almost no figure in his position manages to do. He tried to step back. He had a wife he had been with since the 1990s and whom he had married years earlier. He had a young family. He drove a Mercedes. He trained at the Fitness First in Rockdale, kept regular hours, and drank coffee at suburban cafes. To his neighbors, he was a powerfully built, polite former criminal who appeared to be trying to leave the past behind. But Sydney's Underworld is a small place, and a man like Howie does not simply dissolve into ordinary life. People knew who he was. People knew where he trained and what he drove, and roughly when his sessions ended. Years later, when the case against the men accused of killing him went to court, prosecutors would point not to the old war with the Hells Angels, but to something far more intimate. The Crown alleged that Howie and one of the men accused of his murder had once been close friends, and that the friendship had curdled, that the relationship had soured during a fishing trip to the Central Coast over the summer of 2016 and 2017. Whatever the truth of that falling out, the predictability of Howie's new, quiet routine made him an easy man to find. On February 14, 2018, that routine ended in the gym car park. After the shooting, New South Wales detectives launched a major investigation, codenamed Strike Force Amirs. They had the burning getaway car. They had a second abandoned vehicle, a Toyota Orion, recovered nearby, and critically, they had forensic evidence, a balaclava carrying DNA, gunshot residue, and material linking specific individuals to the vehicles used in the attack. Over the following months and years, several men were charged. One of them, Ahmad Dudar, pleaded guilty to being an accessory after the fact, for helping to dispose of the getaway car after the killing. He was sentenced to a term of several years, but Dudar was never accused of pulling the trigger. The men the prosecution alleged had actually carried out the hit were 2 others, a lone wolf bikie named Yusuf Nazlioglu, said to be the balaclava-clad gunman, and Jamal El-Jaidi, said to be the getaway driver. And here the story takes the turn that separates it from almost every other underworld killing. Because when Nazlioglu and Eljaidi finally faced trial for the murder of Mick Hawi, a jury acquitted them both of murder and of manslaughter. The evidence that had seemed so damning was not enough to convince 12 jurors beyond reasonable doubt. Both men walked free, and under the principle of double jeopardy, neither could ever be tried again for Hawi's death. In the eyes of the law, the murder of one of the most powerful bikie bosses in Australian history was, and remains, unsolved. No one has ever been convicted of killing Mick Hawi. If you wanted a lesson in how the underworld really works, how it operates outside the reach of the courts that are supposed to govern it, you would find it in what happened next. Yusuf Nazlioglu walked out of his murder trial a free man. He did not get to enjoy that freedom for long. In June 2022, Nazlioglu was shot multiple times in the car park of his own apartment building in Sydney's inner west. His wife was there. He was taken to hospital and he died, gunned down in a car park, in front of someone who loved him, in almost exactly the same manner as the man he had been accused of killing 4 years earlier. In time, others would be charged over Nazlioglu's death, and in 2025, a jury would convict one man of his murder. The wheel that had turned for Mick Hawi had simply turned again. The car park, the close-range shots, the waiting, the disguise, the getaway, the same grammar of violence, repeating, claiming the next man in the line. Today, Mick Hawi lies buried in Sydney. The Comancheros he once commanded are no longer a local Sydney club swinging bollards in an airport terminal. They have become a sprawling transnational network, with leadership scattered across the world and law enforcement agencies on several continents tracking their movements. The Hells Angels endure, as they have for decades, with their own enemies and their own long memories. And the killing of Mick Hawi sits in the police files as a closed investigation with no convicted killer, a man hunted down in daylight, in a suburb full of ordinary people going about ordinary lives, by figures the justice system was never able to hold to account. In Sydney's underworld, leaving is the one thing almost no one is allowed to do. Mick Hawi tried. He served his sentence. He walked out. He bought the coffees and drove the children and kept the gym hours of a man trying to become someone else. But the world he had ruled did not recognize the idea of a clean exit. It recognized only the man he had been. And in the end, the same car park logic that took him would reach out and take the man accused of his killing too. There is no retirement from a life like this. There is only the day it catches up. Thank you for watching. If you want to understand the new generation of Comancheros, the bosses who took the club Hawi, once led and ran it from penthouses and safe houses on the other side of the world, until international police finally closed in, then the next video on your screen is one you will not want to miss. Make sure you subscribe to Sydney Crime so you never miss a downfall. I will see you there.